Hello again. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. And today I want to talk about self-awareness. So here's a little bit of context for you. I recently, about a month ago, was going through a certification program for Patrick Lencioni's 6 Types of Working Genius. And I am someone who really appreciates some of the context of Patrick Lencioni's teachings in the variety of books, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Death by Meeting, all of those different books. But his 6 Types of Working Genius has been a new discovery and experience for me as I do coaching with individuals and with organizations. And during the 2-day certification process, we had a question that came up about leadership and who is a good leader, or what are some of the indications of someone who is a good leader. And as we had these breakout sessions and large group discussion, someone said a good leader to them is a self-aware leader. And I know I had to pause when I heard that. It was the first time that I heard that association with leadership. But intuitively, I totally understand the connection and the importance of it. And we had a little bit of a discussion in small groups and in the large breakout team to find out what exactly that meant and why it resonated with so many of us. And the theme was that so often we hadn't thought about it. We simply hadn't thought about it. We looked at leadership and we thought about leadership capabilities, their competencies or their proficiency, the outcomes or their success matrix, or different things that were oftentimes associated with actions. And this was such a different theme because it's more of in the coaching space, the touchy-feely aspect of leadership that in a dominant culture society, we don't oftentimes talk about. And frankly, I'm not sure a lot of successful leaders, if we have that access to how self-aware they are or are not. And so it resonated with many of us. And how it shows up for me is as someone who you've heard quite often on this podcast, me talk about for the majority of my early life, where I was focused on, again, getting good grades, putting my head down, getting good grades, working hard, getting into college, and then rinse and repeat until I got a great job, and then being able to keep and maintain that job so I could take care of family. Everything was focused on your actions. And it wasn't focused on how you were feeling inside of that. And that's one of the reasons why this podcast is so important to me, is because we need to unpack, certainly talk about all of the things that we are doing that lead to success or happiness, but also who we have to be inside of that journey. And when we think about a self-aware leader, self-awareness is literally the ability that you have to monitor your own emotions and reactions. Again, something that we don't talk about or you aren't trained in any of your courses or certification programs or in business school, frankly. But self-awareness really lets you have a better understanding of your strengths, your weaknesses, your triggers, those things that may have you tune people out, tune feedback out perhaps, those motivators. Like, what is it, in fact, if it's not money, that motivates you to show up, to get up early, to stay late, to get the job done, and other characteristics. So that's self-awareness, right? Weaknesses, triggers, motivators, and other characteristics. And I think that being self-aware allows you to take a deeper look at those emotions, which again, in the workplace, we don't often allow ourselves or encourage others to explore and to share. Brene Brown has done a great job of talking about vulnerability, and vulnerability would require you to be self-aware enough to explore and take a deeper look at your emotions. But if you take that deeper look of why you're feeling a certain way about something that's going on, something that someone says to you, an assignment that you received, feedback that you received, anything, and it also allows you to understand how you can turn that energy into actions that are going to lead you in the right direction. So I Googled it after that conversation that we had during the certification. It was like, self-awareness, what are some of the keys to self-awareness? And I came up with a great list from a couple of different sites of some of the things that were said consistently across sites. One was, a key to being self-aware is to keep an open mind. Literally is to know and understand your truth or your point of view, but also to appreciate and invite other perspectives into the conversation. So keeping an open mind was a key that was consistently referenced online about being self-aware. The second thing that showed up was being mindful of your strengths and weaknesses. And this is something in basketball that whether you like it or not, you get feedback on a regular basis, whether it's in practice or in games or at the end of the season, depending on the outcome or the conversation you have with your coach. You are very much aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. And it doesn't mean that, right, you always have to focus on your weaknesses. To a certain extent, some of the best basketball players actually continue to focus on their strengths and make their strengths better. And then, as Tom Brady says, is maybe get 1% better on your weaknesses. And if you get 1% better, that's a multiplier. It actually helps you in a lot of different ways. So keep an open mind, be mindful of your strengths and weaknesses. The third thing that showed up quite a bit was staying focused. And to me, this means understanding why being self-aware, why your mindset is important. Not just focus on the task, but focus on how you feel and how you're showing up and what may be leading to some of those things. So if you get feedback and the feedback is around something that may trigger you on a regular basis, if you stay focused on the energy that you're showing up with, then you may be able to unpack that a little bit in the future. There were some other great tips that they had: setting boundaries, knowing your emotional triggers, knowing what topics or information may trigger you. It may be the truth. Like the truth trigger is a really important one. When someone speaks truth to you and you just can't handle it, that may trigger an emotion. It could be inside of different identities. It could be from somebody that maybe you don't have a great relationship. Their feedback may trigger you in a specific way. Some other keys to self-awareness was embracing your intuition, practicing self-discipline, considering how your actions actually affect others, because what we know, our intention isn't always in alignment with our impact. And if we want to be a self-aware leader, it's not just about, I had good intentions. It's about what was the actual impact? How did it actually land with my team member or my colleague or my family member? Consider your actions and how they affect others. So important. And then the last two was apologize when necessary, which sometimes can be difficult to own up to something or being wrong. And the last one is asking for feedback. It's getting check-ins. Sometimes you may think that you're on the right path, that you're not acting with emotion or you're not responding with emotion. But if you get feedback from others, if you look at their body language or you actually solicit their feedback, that may be a great way for you to maintain and establish self-awareness that will help you be that good leader. So some things to think about. I would love to hear from all of you all about other ways to make sure that you're amplifying your self-awareness, which will allow you to be a better leader, whether it's in your household, whether it's in your community, in your church, or in your workplace. I'm actually going to solicit some of that information about how to be self-aware about your style. And so on today's episode of Unlocking the Club, we are excited to be joined by Solita C. Roberts.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
Today on Unlocking the Club, I will be joined by Solita C. Roberts. Solita is the founder of Style to Impact, an image coaching and training company that works with women entrepreneurs and executives to build wardrobes that power their confidence, influence, impact, and income. Solita focuses on authentic styling for confidence, visibility, and impact by transforming lives through workshops, presentations, one-on-one personal styling, wardrobe mindset shifts, closet revamps, and power dressing. Solita has worked with TEDx, keynote speakers, lawyers, financial advisors, and coaches, and was named one of LinkedIn's 2022 top voices in the fashion and beauty industry, and was featured on the CW network. Prior to Style to Impact, Solita worked for one of Switzerland's top wealth management companies and spent over 15 years in the financial industry. Her mission is to empower more women, especially Black and Brown women, to represent more of who they are in the clothes they wear, to get confidence that they need to show up unapologetically and position themselves for success. Her favorite quote is, "Who you are is non-negotiable. And if you can't be who you are where you are, change where you are, not who you are," by Caroline Wanga. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club today with Solita C. Roberts.
Oh my gosh. It's always crazy when you hear your bio being read out loud.
What was comfortable or uncomfortable for you, and what was that feeling?
It's a feeling like when you hear, it's one thing, you know what you have done as an individual, but when you hear someone read it out, there's a certain level of pride and joy that you feel. And then you get to that realization of the impact of the work that you're doing and what you're trying to do. And so every time I hear my bio, I'm like, just a reminder of, yes, there is a reason, there's a purpose why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I enjoy what I'm doing. So thank you very much for having
Well,
me. I appreciate
you're
being here.
welcome. And we're going to have to unpack that a little bit because I think it's such a great point. Is so often, I know a lot of times Black women do not pause to acknowledge their greatness, the greatness that they show up in every day as mothers, as sisters, as daughters, as friends in the workplace. And it is in those moments maybe where somebody acknowledges you, or where you have to sit and listen to someone reading your bio, where you actually recognize all of the wonderful and amazing things that you've done. And that is you. Like, I read your bio and was just so impressed with the inspiration behind the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, and just like what you're saying, it's oftentimes I think as women and as Black women, we get into that space. I mean, you talk about it a lot in your on your podcast here, and and the work that you do is that we have to put our heads down and just try to climb the ladder and get to the next and get to the next. And sometimes what happens, we're so focused on everything that didn't go right, the ifs, the ands, and we should have done this or should not have done that, or maybe we're not exactly at the level that we want to be. And we don't always take a beat to just say, okay, where am I today? What have I accomplished? Right? Because you've changed. There are things that you've learned about yourself. There are things that you would have accomplished, but we're so focused on getting to the next level that we don't always just take that pause and to recognize where we're at as professionals, the things that we've done both personally and professionally. It's not just professionally, but things we've done as well in our personal lives. And I think more than anything, that's something that I had to remind myself a lot this year. Every time I get frustrated or I feel like, okay, I'm not at the level that I need to be and I'm second guessing myself, I just kind of take that break and say, okay, Solita, what are some things that you accomplished today? What is something that you are really proud of today? We oftentimes look at what have I done in a year or what I've done in 5 years, but we have to bring it down. Like a mentor of mine, he's like, sometimes just getting through the day is difficult. How about just looking at the moment, the hour, that second? And we have to look at the things that we accomplished in the same way. What did I do today that I can be proud of? And just take a moment to celebrate that. So just hearing my bio again just kind of reminded me of that, just taking a moment and just really acknowledging like the work that I've done. And I'm still ways away from the impact that I really want to make, but I'm on my way. And that's the most important thing.
Yes, you're much closer to it today than you were yesterday. And I love that guidance and that advice for our listeners is right now, as you're listening to this podcast, take a moment to ask yourself, what have you done today that mattered? That mattered to you, that mattered to your community, that mattered to people that are important to you. Whatever your definition or requirement for mattering is, just take a moment to pause to do that. And Solita, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, that it doesn't have to be the grand things. Like, right, we may have this grand plan of whatever our North Star is, and that may be 5 or 10 years away. But what's 5 or 10 minutes away from right now is something that probably is having the impact in some way on your health and well-being or on others. And I remember when I was a general manager for a WNBA team, we were getting ready to play a playoff game, and we'd lost the first game, and it felt like the players were overwhelmed by the expectations. Right? We had high expectations, and so you can tell in that moment we were thinking about, if we lose this game, we're out of the playoffs. And I just pulled a couple of the players aside and said, here's what. Just think about what you can do the first second, on the first play, in the first minutes of the first quarter, of the first half of this next game.
That's it. That's it. That's it. We get, I mean, that's how we were trained, right? That's how we were brought up. Like, you're in high school and you have to start thinking about what you want to be when you grow up, what career path you want to take, looking at organizations that you want to go into. So that's how we were trained, to always look towards the future and like way in advance in the future, and have everything like this checklist of things that we want to accomplish. Whereas, if anything over the last couple of years have shown us that we need to slow down to really appreciate where we're at, and to really establish the healthier boundaries within ourselves and people around us, and how we approach living this one life that we have. And so it's always that constant reminder every time I'm like forging ahead and being all like getting down on myself for not reaching that 5-year goal today. It's like, no, you said that's 5 years. Everything that you have done so far is getting you closer. So that's it. We have to just, it's not always easy, but it's the power of the pause is incredible. Like, whenever you feel overwhelmed, whenever you feel like you're not getting or achieving the things that you set out for yourself later on, just take that power of pause and make a list of, I'm sure we all can make a list within the day, everything that we've been able to accomplish, and not, oh yeah, I was able to close the client. Yeah, that's great. Or I got this promotion. That's great. But just as simple as, you know what, I got up from my desk today and I took a walk, or I drank 4 bottles of water. That's an accomplishment for me, because I don't usually drink water, right?
Exactly.
So if I look over at my water bottle and it's empty, I have to acknowledge the fact that I did something that was uncomfortable for me. And it's like, yeah, I finished that bottle of water. That meant that I somewhat contributed to living a healthier lifestyle today. Can I do that tomorrow? And that's what we should, how we should live our lives. Just live it in those moments, and then eventually you'll realize 2 years from now, you're actually at the goals that you want to achieve simply by living in the moment.
So true. Oftentimes, when you are living in the moment, you'll get somewhere before you know it, right? When you're in your car and you're thinking, this is going to be a long drive,
Yep.
but the music you're playing is great, or you're listening to a great podcast, most likely the podcast called Unlocking the Club or something like that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Or you're in conversation with some friends, and all of a sudden that 3-hour drive that you thought was going to take forever, you've pulled up to the destination. So being able to live in those moments and to account for the moments, I think, is incredibly important. And I'm curious, Solita, for you, we read your bio. What should the audience know that may not be in your bio that you're most proud of?
I think, and I've only come to accept this part of me fully. And so I make this joke, that running joke with my friends or, my family, that I've been an immigrant all my life. And so I'm originally born and raised until my teenage years, the Republic of Guyana, which is the only English speaking country in South America. And when I was a teenager, I then migrated to Antigua and Barbuda, which is in the Caribbean. And now I'm living in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And throughout those transitions, I've had periods like the first time I migrated from Guyana to Antigua, it was difficult for me. It was not only a culture shock, but it was also the first time I felt like I didn't belong. The first time I felt that being who I was and where I was from, that I was being judged for that. Right. And it wasn't an easy feeling, like being in high school and then you're being told like, oh, you're not from here, or, I'm trying to monitor and manage the words that I use so I don't sound like I'm from Guyana, or just something as simple. And I know part of the conversation today is what we're talking about fashion, is that a simple thing as me not wearing gold jewelry because I didn't want to be identified as a Guyanese, right? Because that was one of the things that they use in Antigua as a marker. It's like, oh, if you want to know a Guyanese, look at how much gold they're wearing.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't do, I stayed away from wearing gold for so long. And now that I'm here in a new country, I'm exploring new challenges, I'm exploring new opportunities and learning about myself and the environments that I'm in. I've come to appreciate the fact that I've had all these experiences growing up in different countries, right? You talked earlier, when you started this episode and talking about self-awareness. And that is where just being self-aware to other people, like their journey and their culture and their upbringing, that's something that I really do appreciate about the fact that I've been an immigrant all my life. And, I can share those experiences with others, but at the same time, be aware that my experiences are not necessarily your experiences. And how can I make sure that I'm understanding your story and where you're coming from, while at the same time, sharing parts of myself with those that I come in contact with. So that's something that's not on my bio. I don't think it's anywhere. No, it's not on my bio, probably on my website, but a lot of people don't know that about me. And that's something that I think I really, really do appreciate, the fact that I've had those experiences.
It's fascinating. And you said something that reminded me. I had a conversation actually earlier today with a colleague who just got a new opportunity and was going to donate some of the proceeds from the work that they were doing back to that organization. And I was like, that's a great gesture. And is that also the mindset of someone who has come from either a marginalized or historically excluded identity, where we go out of our way to make sure someone else doesn't feel excluded? And I wonder if for you, of going from Guyana to Antigua, right, if your mindset of you feeling like you didn't belong, the first thing you said about making that transition was, I didn't feel like I belonged.
Yeah.
If that inspired in you in a way that you're aware of, or something that may not have been in your consciousness at the time, to make sure that you're making sure others feel like they belong.
I mean, at the time, obviously, as a teenager, I was trying to navigate my own sense of self, right, and my environment, and just getting an understanding as to who I am and where I fit into, this new country. But I think as I grew, just learning more about myself, being more self-aware, like some of the things that I appreciate about the country that I came from, what I appreciate about my people, and what I appreciate about being in this new country, right? Because then part of their culture became part of my culture, and like how to fuse the two and how to not shy away from who I am. It definitely brought that, that level where I'm now aware of who I am. And it also inspired the work that I'm doing today, right? Because yes, I'm a Black woman, but I'm not a Black American woman. And so my experiences as a Black Caribbean woman is totally different from a Black woman in America. And so I had to then understand, like, some of the, like, we talk about privileges. And even though I'm a Black woman in the Caribbean and I compare myself to a Black woman that's living in America, there are certain privileges that I've had as a Black woman, and not having, especially when it comes to like code switching or not having to, change who I am. That's a privilege that I grew up with in the Caribbean, not having to do that. A Black American woman doesn't have the same privilege, or may not have experienced the same privileges. And so the work that I do is to really, one, my privilege of being able to show up as my authentic self, to be able to say, this is who I am. I love colors. I love my nails. I love, I love my natural hair in whatever state that I want it to be in. And this is who I am. This is how I'm showing up in that space. And how can I help you who really want to show up that way? But because of the barriers and the biases here, you may feel as though, not so confident being your true self. And how can I bring my experiences in helping you to say, okay, can I release some of these, just having the courage to be myself. So definitely my experiences have really shaped not only who I am, but also the work that I do today.
Well, speaking to that, you talked about not wearing gold,
Yeah.
right? When you moved.
Yeah.
And I wonder so often on this show, and I think just in conversations with people in general, you find out whatever the inspiration for the occupation that they're in.
Yeah.
There was a young girl who spoke at an event recently, a fundraiser, and she talked about how her mother had a traumatic accident when she was young and she was still in high school, and she had to caretake her mother. She was an only child in a single parent household. And so she spent a lot of the time getting her mother to and from physical therapy, occupational therapy, being in the hospital room and the doctor's office when her mother was getting having her appointments with the doctor. And she now wants to be a physician.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wondered if that same connection
Oh no,
can be.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking back, and just to share some of my journey being in the US. So when I moved from Antigua to Atlanta, that was in 2019. So we know what happened the following year. And so when I moved here, yes, I have family here, but I had no community. Right? There is no network for me to tap into. There's no, I like literally have no friends. Like I'm on that journey of making friends and finding my community in the spaces that I want to go into. And so for me in that moment, I felt like I'm starting over. And it's like, what do I want to do with my life? What impact do I want to make? And so, yes, I did what everybody said, get a job. And so I was doing the interviews and trying to get a job. And then I'm, having the experiences of being on an interview and actually like a phone interview and speaking to someone. And they're like, do you speak English? And I'm like,
Oh,
I
wow.
don't understand. Am I not? Right? But
Yeah.
there was this idea because, oh, I'm an immigrant, then there's one story of what an immigrant is. It's like, oh, someone that doesn't speak English, even though I'm talking to you in English. And so I had to sit down and really evaluate, like, what do I want my life to represent? Like, what do I want my life to represent? Not following the guidelines of, okay, you need to get a job, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like, the stories we've been told, but what do I want my life to stand for? What impact do I want to make? And so I sat down. I didn't have it all figured out. Don't think I have it all figured out. I'm actually now learning a lot more of the work that I want to do and the impact that I want to have. But I really sat down and said, okay, what do I want to do? What are some of the challenges that I've experienced in my life, both personally and professionally? And how can what's that one thing, first of all, what's that one thing that I can do that would inspire me to get up every single day throughout the challenges? And that one thing was every single day I had to get up and get dressed. So while I was struggling mentally, while I was struggling to find my community, while I was struggling to understand myself and my space and my place in this new space, I had to get up and get dressed every day. And so in that act of getting dressed represented me putting myself out there and feeling more confident being who I am. So I'm like, if this is allowing me to do this, and I'm seeing the challenges Black women, Black and brown women are facing, being themselves and showing up in the spaces, can I use my experience, one, of just that period in my life where I didn't feel like I belonged, where I felt like I had to change an aspect of who I am to fit into a culture in a country that, like, no, this is who I am. I should be able to bring my whole self. And can I also use me getting up every day and being intentional about getting dressed? Yes, it's an act, but it's a tool as well, right? It's an act that you get up, yes, you put on clothes, but it's a tool that I use, one, to build my confidence, two, to show up in the spaces that I want to show up in, the rooms that I wanted to be in, and being able to have a presence in that room, being able to use my voice in a way that allows me to create the changes and the impact that I wanted. And so I took all of that and sat down and thought about what do I want my business to be and what do I want the name of my business to be. And that when I thought about, okay, I want to be a personal stylist, but I've always said, I don't want to just be any personal stylist, not the personal stylist, not knocking in anyone. Everybody have their own journey. But I did not want to be that personal stylist that says to you, okay, here are the 10 things that you need to buy and put in your wardrobe. It's like, no, the work that I wanted to do and I'm doing is women empowerment through style. How can I get you to show up more as yourself and feel more confident going into the rooms that you're going into, representing who you are, reflecting who you are through your clothes? And so I thought about my business, Style to Impact. That's how the name of my business came up. Putting all of that, I'm like, Style to Impact. I'm not just styling you, but I'm allowing you to have the impact that you need and that you're looking for in your personal and your professional life, knowing that when you walk into every room, you're showing up as yourself. So the 10 things that you should add to your wardrobe may not apply to you and it may not apply to someone else. And that's why I like style from an authentic point of view, authentic perspective. Like, who's Angela Taylor? What are some of the things that you want to do? How do you want to show up? What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? Why are you not comfortable with it? And we go through that, understanding like, how can we craft your personal style so that you, when you show up in all the rooms that you're going into, you know, okay, yes, I'm Angela. This is who I am. And there's no part of me that feels like I had to leave part of myself at the door before I enter. So it all had, yeah, I know I answered your question. That's a long, very, very long answer to your question, but super passionate as to why I'm doing what I'm doing and how it's all connected.
Yes, so much to unpack there, including all those questions you were asking about who was Angela, right? Like, we need to answer those questions for sure. But you mentioned first, the danger of a single story is one of my favorite TED Talks of all time. And that is such an important space to be in, is don't just look at two Black women and presume that they have the same lived experience, right? Get to know the individual and his, her, their story for sure. But you talked about how just being able to get up in the morning and put something on, how important that was and how that made you feel, and that it gave you confidence. How did it make you feel? Can you dig down below the surface and let our listeners know the feeling you have of when you show up powerfully in those rooms and you feel like you're looking authentic?
Oh man, that feeling. I wish the feeling is something that I can put in a bottle and sell, because there's so many women that I've worked with and, you know, I see will comment or they're in shared spaces, they talk about, oh, I wish that I can wear that, or I wish I had the body for that, or I wish that, you know, I felt more confident wearing colors or, you know, being myself. And for me, just getting up, because it was the first time in my life, like really honestly, the first time in my life that I've ever felt so down and depressed when I was going through like moving here and then going through COVID, not having that community, everything that I was accustomed to. And so that act of getting up, first I'm going to explain how, like, my process of getting dressed. For many women, that process is, okay, I need to, let's use like a Zoom call. I need to get on a Zoom call and it's going to be with a colleague that I've never met. And so they go in front of their closet and like, okay, yeah, what am I going to put on? Just put on something and go.
That sounds familiar.
I'm very intentional about what I'm wearing and how I'm showing up. And so for me, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning and, you know, I have my moment where I, you know, affirm myself and how I want to feel and just my day, I go into my closet and I stand in my closet. I tell my friend that in that moment is like my meditation moment. And it's not a matter of, okay, what do I wear? It's a matter of, how do I want to show up? How do I want to feel? Do I want to feel vibrant and bold today? Do I want to feel a bit mellow, but have some self-expression, personality? And how am I going to do that? And to give you an example, just looking at this image of myself, I want it to be low key. I wanted to have my natural hair in its glory, but I also wanted to make a statement. And so I chose my necklace as that thing to make the statement, but everything else is low key. I didn't have to fuss about my hair. I just kind of like, make that twist. This is just a simple t-shirt that I'm wearing. And I just made the statement with the necklace. And so that feeling of getting dressed for me, it's knowing how I want to show up and connecting it to how I want to be seen, how I want to express myself. And it's not coming from comparing myself to anything else. I was not worried about, and I've always say this, if you're getting dressed and you're worried about what others are wearing, like what is everybody going to be wearing to that function? You are dressing from the wrong perspective. It becomes where it's situational, where it's like, I'm going to get dressed based on, and you're trying to figure out what everyone else is doing. But when you dress from you, how do I want to show up? There's no time that I sit down and say, oh, I wonder what everyone else will be wearing. No, that feeling of saying, how do I want to show up? It's important to me. And that feeling of knowing that whenever I show up, it's a true reflection of who I am. I'm never walking into that room going, oh, I wish that I'd worn that, or I could wear that, or I look like her. It's I'm looking at another woman and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that outfit that you're wearing. That is bomb. You look great in that, because I feel great about myself. And so it's easy for me to compliment as opposed to compare. And that feeling I wish I can put in a bottle.
If we can unlock that, it'll be a gift to society, where we don't have to conflate our well-being and success in comparison to somebody else, as if it's a zero-sum game. If Solita shows up in all of her glory looking fantastic, then that diminishes how I showed up, right? Both can be true and both should be true if we are starting to dress with intention. I love that story, and wonder, like, what are some of what's the range or mosaic of things that you go into your closet and you try to manifest? So you said you just wanted to kind of have a casual, simple, like, what are some of the other things that you can consider when putting an outfit together?
I look at, obviously, where I'm going is something that you have to consider, the room that I'm going into. So for instance, I did, and a couple of weeks ago, I went to a women in technology forum, right? And I know in that space, like women in technology in the tech space is very casual, but at the same time, I understood the impact this particular organization was looking to make. And I understood by just doing some light survey as to who are the women that they're attracting, who are the women that have been to, some of the functions that they've had before. And I looked at, how do I want to present myself? Colors is by far something that's always going to be part of my outfit. So it's never, because that's in my wardrobe. Colors, it means a lot to me. It really helps me to feel more confident and bring an air of brightness to my personality as well. And so I knew that colors was something that for sure I'm going to wear. But at the same time, I wanted to be comfortable, because I knew I had to walk from the parking deck to, to the building, and it was a networking event and I'm doing some walking around. So I looked at, what do I want to wear in terms of how do I want to represent myself in this room? I've always tried to be, not to sound, anyway, but how can I be a step above? So I'm not looking at, yes, this is women in tech, and in the tech space is known to be casual. I'm never a casual person. So like jeans is something that you wouldn't find in my closet. I'm desperately trying to step out my comfort zone and find jeans, but it just doesn't work for me. And so I had to look at, how do I want to show up? What does that look like? What are the key ingredients for me? Looking at who's going to be in the room, how do I want to present myself, and being able to walk around and network and have a good conversation. And so I opt for this really nice printed green ruffle front shirt with a very, very simple dress that you look at the outfit, we tend to think that to dress well, you have to, have expensive clothing. If you did the total of my outfit, it was no more than $100. And I look amazing, if I say so myself. Those are some of the things you have to consider. Like, first of all, who's going to be in the room? what is the message do you want to leave in that room? What is the presence? What do you want people to feel and know about you when you walk into that room? Because when you walk into that room, before you say anything, everyone is looking at you. Everyone is judging you. Yes, placing judgment on someone, we all know how that can go, but understand that when you walk into the room, how I look at it, it's everyone is looking for commonalities and everyone is looking for the message in terms of how confident you are showing up in that room. And when you feel confident and you walk into that room, everyone is then attracted to that, to your level of confidence. And so they want to talk to you. And so just understanding that and just walking into my closet, knowing, okay, what's my message? How do I want to feel? What's the weather? What's the environment? And dressing with those things in mind. That's, some of the key ingredients that really help me to step into myself and not having this whole panic attack and trying to figure out, oh, what do I wear to go to this event? Because I always dress from the place of me. I put myself in that space in terms of how I want to show up as opposed to how everyone else is showing up.
That's amazing. And as you're talking, it reminded me of, the last couple of years since we only had to really dress from the waist up on Zoom, right? You didn't have to worry, you wore something comfortable on your lower body, and then you whatever the occasion desired or needed is how you dressed from the top up. But a good friend of mine and someone who is kind of the brand strategist for Unlocking the Club, Juju Hook or Julia Hook, she has told some colleagues and I, like, you should have a signature thing. Like, what's your signature? And for her, it's her glasses. And so a couple people have adopted that similar thing of whatever their glasses would be. Others, it might be jewelry. And I was trying to think, like, it's not that for me. I was going away from wearing glasses, like jewelry maybe wasn't the thing. And I had to get intentional and think about, like, who am I? Where do I want to have an impact? And Unlocking the Club came to mind. Like I am trying to create a movement where we start to see and hear the stories and the voices of Black women in a different way. And there's a lot to unlock. And so for me, it became a hoodie. And so I'm saying unlocking hoodies. And so I had a couple of formal events recently, some broadcast work that I do with the Pac-12 for women's basketball. And as I was getting ready to prepare for that work, I was like, what am I going to wear? So I got online and found a couple of stylish blazers with hoodies that I love. And in some games that I've done since then and the studio work that I did, I wore, and I showed up with such confidence. And it's the intentionality you speak to for the impact that I want to have. Is the hoodie for me for the last decade, right, since Trayvon Martin, has had a different meaning and context. And to a certain extent, I may wear hooded sweatshirts, let's say, but I never put it on my head outside of the house. And I want to unlock that and reclaim it and be unapologetic for wearing hoodies and have us as a people reclaim what a hoodie is. And so it's that intentionality that when I can lean into that, I feel so much more comfortable and confident than maybe with some other outfits that I choose.
That is so powerful. And I'm going to applaud you for doing that. Because when I talk about Black and brown women of color, reclaiming our identity, reclaiming our power, moving away from conforming, and really having the courage, stepping into having that courage to redefine what professional looks like. That's an example. Because we have the power to redefine it. When we talk about a Black woman showing up with her natural hair, and it's like, that's not professional. You have no idea. Like I've never came from that space. There was one time in my life where I was asked if my boss had anything to say about my natural hair. And I made a point of asking my colleague, what do you mean? So I'm that person. I don't do the long debate. I'm like, what do you mean? Because I want you to repeat what you're saying. So hopefully,
I want you to name it, to be on record of you naming and speaking that into.
Yeah, and hopefully it triggers something like, oh, this is a stupid question. I shouldn't probably be asking this. Yeah, if I can say stupid on
yes, you can.
But but it I asked you, like, what do you mean? Oh, and they repeat. I'm like, but what does that mean for the thing growing out of my head? So I had that moment with you. And so for me, just being able to have Black women and women of color really say, and like seeing it on social media, like all these new headshots with Black women stepping out and say, I'm wearing my natural hair for the first time ever in my life. This is professional. It gave me chills. And I cannot tell you, when I saw the former First Lady, Michelle Obama,
Yes.
stepped out with her braids, I'm like, because in that moment, you know, what she's done for every Black girl
Yes.
that's wondering or has been told that this is not beautiful.
Yep.
They saw themselves there and going like, no. And that's power, because we're now changing. The generation is changing. We've now empowered them to say, this is who I am. So you redefining what the hoodie means and what the hoodie means as a professional woman in a professional space, that's powerful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very much for doing that work, right? Because if we all, I always say, if we all individually, it's not always going to be easy. I understand that.
Yeah.
But if each of us look at ways in which we can redefine the standard of what beauty means, what professional means as a Black woman, and what are some things that we can do, like, first of all, look at yourself, that self-awareness piece. What are parts of myself that I was holding back in showing up as? What are parts of myself that I felt scared if I showed up as this person, I may not get the opportunity. If I showed up as this person, I'm going to be marginalized or anything like that. And then look at it from that perspective, like, what do I have to lose? Because the biases are there, regardless of how you show up. The worst thing that you can do is to feed into that by removing parts of yourself from the rooms that you're going into. And so if each of us can look at one thing in ourselves that we are like, okay, I'm comfortable in doing this one thing for now. This is my start. And do that and step into that room. We get to shape and change the narrative. And for me, that is like, it's powerful because we don't see it on we don't see it on television. We don't see it in the magazines. We're not seeing it in the boardrooms. There may be a one, right? And we're looking around like, oh my gosh, how you do it? Like, how have you done it? I want to be like you. But we can do it. We just need to find one thing that we're comfortable in and redefine what that means. And so thank you again for redefining what that hoodie means, because we know what that came with.
Yes.
So to change the narrative on that, and as a Black woman in a professional space, that is impactful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And it really is. This show is about, we're unlocking the club, but we're reclaiming our power.
Yes.
And the sound that I hear when I think about reclaiming our power was Maxine Waters from the House of Representatives,
yes,
who during some of the confirmation hearings said, I'm reclaiming my time. When people inside of other identities tried to speak over her or step over her or make her seem small or inconsequential, reclaiming my time. And I think we need to do that. To your point, is to make sure that we can walk in a room with pride and confidence and know that we belong in there, and that we have a perspective to share, ideas that will help, and all of those things is really important. Jamel Hill said something recently during an episode with Draymond Green. She's on Draymond Green's Throwing Bones podcast where they play dominoes. And she was talking about athletes at the time, but she mentioned they want you to think that you don't have any leverage, but you have all the leverage. Society and dominant culture leaders want you to think that you have none.
Yeah.
And if you believe them, you won't try to use it.
Exactly.
We have much more power and domain. They want us to believe that the opposite is true. But if we, one by one, model for others and show up wearing your natural hair, reclaiming whatever your style and fashion sense is, ask the question that, what did you mean when you said that?
Yeah.
we can start to reclaim our power.
No, absolutely. And oftentimes there's this separation. Like you're never being told not to bring your full self into a room or a space as a collective. We're being told as individuals. So Solita, I thought in the meeting yesterday you were a bit too whatever, or maybe you want to tone down because we think that as an individual you're being told that. And so we have in that moment, it's like, okay, as an individual, I guess if I want this seat at this table, if I want to be in this room, if I want to feed my family, if I want to do this, then I guess I should mold myself into this expectation of what I should be. But we've all at some point in our lives been told something that caused us to not show up as our full self. But if we take it as a collective, do you understand the impact? That's why we're never told as a collective. We're told as individuals, because as individuals, we feel as though our power, like we don't have power in that situation. But you do have power. You have power by asking the question of why. How does this impact? Help me to understand. You do have power when you say, okay, thank you very much. However, this is me. And if I have the time, I will tell you about my heritage and why and where it comes from and why I show up this way and what this means. Because at the end of the day, you can't control how someone sees you and the biases that they choose to have, but you can control how you show up. You can create spaces, especially we always talk about, I'm new in my career, so I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I just started. I'm a firm believer. You teach people how to treat you, and you really show people how to respect you when you walk in that room on day one. Being yourself. I'm not saying, when I say being yourself, I'm not saying to be rude. I'm not saying, I'm saying you walk into that room wearing your natural hair on the first day, they'll come to adjust.
Yes.
But if you walk into that room and deciding that to be in that room, you need to be something that you're not, they've come to accept you as the thing that you told them that you are. So there is power in your authenticity. There is power in you showing up. And I really think I look at authenticity as your activism, as you're saying, this is me. And if we do it as a collective, we change the narrative.
We change the narrative. And we are here on Unlocking the Club, and Solita C. Roberts is preaching right now. You teach others how to treat you. How you show up is how you demand people to respect you.
Absolutely.
I love what you just pointed to. And I agree, it's the collective, and it's our collective story. I think so often as Black women, we don't want to share those stories, those private moments that may cause us to be judged or feel like we're going to be judged.
Yeah.
But it is that information that is going to help us show up collectively with power. And you said on your Instagram account recently, you had an amazing post, and it really resonated with me. It said that this world would make you believe that to succeed, you'll have to shrink to fit and hide your whole self. Don't let them win. Stay anchored in your story and comfortable with who you are. You can be exactly who you are and grow. And that feels really personal to me when I read it, and as if it was rooted in a lived experience for you or someone in your life. What's the story behind that insight?
It's this, I don't want to say social media age, but it's this period in life that we're in where in the work that I do, I've come to realize that, and hearing the stories of so many women, it's that idea that we need to be something else. You need to be less than who you are. You need to shrink. You need to put your head down and get the work done. You need to be grateful for the space that you're in. You need not to ruffle any feathers because we gave you an opportunity. You're the only one in here. You're the CEO, right? We don't usually, you got this. You're able to do that. And people always come from that space of trying to make it feel as though you didn't work for the things that you have, that you don't, that getting to the space and the place that you're at, you didn't work for it, that somehow it was given to you because, oh, we're trying to meet this, you know, bringing Black women into the C-suite, or we're trying to, support women of color. And so that's how you got it. And oftentimes we feed into that narrative and we think that since I'm the only one that have ever made it to the C-suite in this company as a Black woman, as a woman of color, then I need to adjust and do everything that the world tells me that I should be. And I think part of that, really inspired that post is when I looked at the confirmation hearing that we all experience of watching a Black woman having to grin and bear, having to find the right words, having to keep her expression as neutral as possible.
Girl, I couldn't have done it. After the first day or hour, I would have clapped back. I couldn't have done it.
And we, a lot of us say that. And as a collective, we understood that moment and those moments. Yeah. And we also understood what she was doing for us and the importance of just staying the course to change the narrative. Yeah. And I say that post to just remind women and remind Black women, women of colors, that you get to decide. There is power in your story, your truth. You live it on a daily basis and taking that power back. Some of us are going to be in positions where in that moment where we saw that, the justice, she couldn't express herself, but she did not hold back by allowing them to derail her. Yeah. She stayed even keel, but she still stood her ground. Yeah. And that was a reminder to us that even though sometimes we're in certain positions that, we want to just go out guns blazing, that we just have to stay even keel, but hold your ground and speak your truth and show up as yourself. And that was a reminder to that. It's that we have to. Don't shrink. Your story is your story. There's power in your story. There's power in who you are. There's power in everything that you do and what makes you you. First of all, find the rooms that would allow you to be that person. And that's why I love that quote so much. Because you shouldn't change who you are. Change the rooms. And if you can't change the room right away, plan your exit strategy to change the room. Because being in any space that you can't be yourself, you can't bring your most authentic and be your healthiest self. I'm sorry, I have one life. One life. And it's all about how do I want to show up in this one life that I have. And I really believe in showing up in this one life as I have to be myself. Like, yes. I can't be anybody else, and I shouldn't be required to be anyone else but myself.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that I loved about that moment, right, as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson showed up so powerfully, indicated why representation matters.
Yes.
And it was when Cory Booker had his opportunity, and it felt like 10 minutes. It was probably just 10 seconds where he just paused and smiled at her and looked her in the eye, and she started to, you could tell, well up a little bit. But she was seen.
Yeah.
She was seen. And in that moment, I know collectively as a Black woman, I felt that, knowing that somebody in that room sees you and values you and knows what you're having to put up with.
Yes. And that's the power, as you said, that's the power of our representation. And so the work that I do with my clients in helping you represent more of who you are in the clothes that you wear, what you're doing is creating spaces for other Black women, other women of color to say, I see you, I can be you, I'm going to be you. Yes. And start making their transition into embracing the parts of themselves that they thought or they were told they had to leave at the door if they wanted a seat at the table. It's like, no, be your whole and authentic self, be comfortable in who you are, advocate for that part of you that never felt that you could bring your whole self to that room, right? Creating space when you show up, you also creating space, like a safety space where, imagine if you showed up in a room with 4 other Black women and they can feel and see that you're being your authentic self. You've created a safe space for them to do this.
Exactly. I love what you're saying. So many of the things that you're saying, but what you just did was to bring unlocking the club and the concept full circle, and to shift the narrative about what unlocking the club truly needs to be for Black women, those that identify as Black, those that identify as Black and female. Is earlier on in our conversation, Solita, you mentioned this conversation around of having to fit in when you first came to Atlanta or even Antigua, like, right, having to fit in. And then you realize, like, right, that was too exhausting and I just need to be my authentic self. That literally is unlocking the club. Is we need to start our own clubs. We don't need to kind of pound the pavement and beat on the doors trying to get into others' clubs where they'll never accept us. They'll keep moving, like, right, the goalposts to make sure that we never quite get into that club. We need to be able to create our own clubs, and that requires that self-awareness where we figure out who we are and who we want to be. And I think your aunt had some great context around this that I appreciate, kind of her advice to you. And I oftentimes think that we find ourselves trying to fit into others' clubs early on in our journey.
Yeah.
And maybe at a different stage in our journey, we're fed up, we're sick and tired of it, and we're willing to pivot. I'm hoping that folks earlier on in their career and in their journey can listen to some of this advice, because it can be exhausting and debilitating and traumatic to try to fit into those clubs. So, but your aunt gave you some great advice that I think is important for us all to hear. And that advice was to teach people how you want to be treated and show people how you want to be respected. Now, how has that advice influenced your journey? And were there times that you actually didn't follow that advice?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There were times when I did not follow that advice. Because there's this, I mean, you talk about, there's this idea that, especially when you're in a new environment, we always look for ways that we can fit in. We're not trying to stand out too much. And sometimes that can be to our detriment. And so, for the first year when I moved to Atlanta, I'm living here, not knowing anyone, not having a community, I was looking for clubs that I can fit into. And I remember specifically it felt like a group of Black women on Instagram that all knew each other and were all supporting each other. And I felt like that was a space I needed to be in. I needed to connect with them. I needed to befriend them. And so I spent a lot of time engaging with their posts, engaging in conversation, hoping that they will notice me, right? Hoping that they'll be like, oh, who's this girl Solita that's always commenting on my posts? Let's invite her to our table, right? I felt like if I did that, that was the results I was going to get. And when nobody invited me to the table and I felt like, oh, I guess I'm not worthy and it's a reflection on me. But really and truly, what I needed to do was to figure out where I was in my life, in my career. Like, it's not trying to get into a room, but trying to understand how I can create my own community, how I can use my voice, like share my voice, what's my story on these platforms, and build my community from there. And once I have my community, then I'll be like, okay, which rooms do I want to be in? Looking back, I'm like, yeah, that's not a room that I want to be in, right? I only wanted to be in that room because I felt like I didn't have a place and I wanted to belong. And so I spent all that time trying to do that as opposed to building my own community. And so it was only a couple, like when I started, I shift my focus mainly to LinkedIn, that I really got intentional about building my own community, sharing my story, getting people to understand my journey and connecting with their journey. And that's how I built my community. And so, yes, I went against my aunt's advice, but it's really helped me as a reminder, especially like later in my entrepreneurship journey, as I'm building my business, to remember that in every space, we often think that, like even in building a business, we think that, okay, your customers sometimes are the ones that determine your journey. Not necessarily. If you say, this is my brand, this is my brand colors, this is my personal style, this is how I want to show up, your audience that you're trying to connect with would like you for that. And you get to determine what that looks like. Yes, over time it's going to change, but you get to determine what it looks like. The same goes for the respect that I wanted, right? I needed to show my audience that this is who I am. Be vulnerable when there's a need to be vulnerable, sharing my story, my journey, and really saying, yeah, this is me. Some days I have it, some days I don't. Most days I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing, but understand that this is the way I want to be seen. This is the way I want to be respected. This is the way I want to be treated. And it was all up to me, that level of self-awareness. And I'm so like, when you started a podcast and you start talking about self-awareness, I was there nodding my head, because that is one of the, I call it like one of my core values, self-awareness. And I've always said that, people will say, we need to love each other more. There needs to be more love. I honestly believe there needs to be more self-awareness in the world. We each need to be aware of, one, the things that we're doing that may harm somebody, and the things that we need to do to become better individuals. So yeah, that advice from my aunt is something that when I made the post, I was reminded again, because I was struggling in a moment, and I had to remind myself, no, I show people how I want to be respected by how I am showing up.
Yes, yes. And when you have that self-awareness, you're able to actually understand that we're a work in progress. So how we want to show up and how we are able to have an impact will evolve over time.
Yes, absolutely. Give yourself grace and space to grow. That's what I say. Give yourself grace and space to grow. Everything, takes time. It's a journey, but you have to be intentional. You have to, and you also have to take the action. You just can't say, oh, I want to get into this club, or I want to dress better, I want to be more confident. You can't just say. You have to make a list of some of the action steps that you need to take. And it, starting from small things is even looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I am great, I'm beautiful, I'm awesome, I'm fantastic as who I am. And I deserve to be in that room. And I'm going to go into that room as myself. Like, just reaffirming yourself, but you have to take the action. You can't just say, you have to decide what those action steps are and start doing it.
Yes. And what's required there is to pause for a moment so that you can live in that self-awareness to then recalibrate if and when necessary.
Yeah.
We're here on Unlocking the Club with Solita C. Roberts, dishing out a lot of great advice and insight and perspective about how you can style so that you have impact when you walk in those rooms and you open those doors and you create your own clubs. We're going to be right back here on Unlocking the Club with Solita for the back nine here momentarily. Do you want to stop feeling like you have little to no control over your life's journey and instead amplify your life's purpose? You all know me as Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, but I am also a business, career, life, and leadership coach, helping my clients to live their best life. Every day, I help my clients discover what they truly want in life, and then unlock the club on how they can live their best life. If you're like many of my clients, you have found yourself over the years prioritizing everyone else and everything else. Your job, your significant other, your family, your friends, your community, the list goes on and on. Well, I'm here to tell you the best thing you can do for others is to invest in yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to succumb to the fear of failure. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish. You simply need to prioritize you. You may be thinking that coaching is for other people, But trust me when I say that we all could benefit from a good coaching relationship. Together, we'll build a plan to help you amplify your gifts, clarify your goals, and accelerate your journey toward the life you desire, which may be finding financial wealth, spiritual health, relationship success, and/or freedom and flexibility. You no longer have to feel like you aren't welcome into someone else's club. Let me empower you to leverage all of your extraordinary gifts and create your own club. Head on over to unlockingtheclub.com to book a free 20-minute introductory call to learn more about our Unlocking Your Journey coaching packages, or use code UNLOCK to get a 15% discount on the 6-month coaching package. Today is the day to invest in yourself. Let's unlock your journey. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. We're here on Unlocking the Club, and we're going to dive into the back nine with Solita C. Roberts. Solita, I'm curious that besides your own home, currently in Atlanta, what's the place that you feel safest to be yourself?
Oh, this is going to sound so. As I said, I'm a Caribbean girl, and this has nothing to do with like my professional life. The place that I feel safest to be myself is Carnival. If you know anything about Caribbean Carnival, so this is not like, I know in the US it's Carnival is like where you go and you have like rides and stuff like that. No, I'm talking about Carnival. Google, if you're listening to this, Google Antigua and Barbuda Summer Festival, Carnival, Trinidad, any of those Caribbean countries, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It is like the most liberating feeling that I've gotten, because I play, just full disclosure, I play mass as well. So if you Google and you see what a costume looks like, I wear those costumes. And I think part of my body acceptance and really accepting the body that I'm in. I mean, I'm super petite. I'm 5 feet. I wish that I was taller. I wish that, I didn't look like a teenager. Carnival reminds me that who I am is who I am, and there's a level of beauty in that. I always feel there's a level of joy that I feel. It connects me to who I am, and I feel free. It's freeing. I'm trying not to, because I don't want to like go too much into what Carnival is. Your listeners can go Google Caribbean Carnival and see what that is, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it allows a part of me that I don't get to, obviously in a professional setting, don't get to express that side of me. But I'll let you know that I love Carnival. I'll let you know that I wear a costume, and it's literally what you'll see. Like, I'm in my birthday suit, so to speak, in a costume, right? Feathers and everything, and just going down in a parade and just having a fantastic time with strangers that I've never met, and we having that community and that camaraderie in that moment. And that's where I feel, one of the places I feel like can be myself as well.
Well, you can just see, if you're watching on YouTube, just the look on your face, that literally, like, just the thought of that experience is incredibly liberating. And I wonder how much of that experience and the feeling that you have when you feel liberated, that you're able to bring into your day-to-day existence as well.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of it, especially when it comes to body confidence, because there are so many women, for different reasons, your body has changed. And, we have on social media, and we have all these different places where it's being told that, oh, you have to look like this. This is what a perfect body is. And those, your own insecurities started seeping. And that's one of the things that affect how some women are showing up, because they don't think they have the ideal body to dress, to look a certain way or to dress professional. And it's like, no, you get to dress the body that you have. You get to embrace that body that you have. And that's one of the things that, you see the women that are playing mass. There's this freedom of who they are, regardless of what you may think about their body. They're like, no, this is my body. I love it. I'm having fun. And I brought some of that into, like, yeah, you may not have that level of confidence to go into the government street and jump up and have a nice time in a costume. But it's a reminder that your body is beautiful. Look at all the things that they've done for you and show appreciation for where you're at. Like if you think that you're not, your body is not at the healthiest that you want it to be, then obviously, yes, you do the work that you need to do, but don't delay how you're showing up because of that. And yeah, Carnival does part of that. The work that I do is being able to remind my audience, like, if you get on me one-on-one, you having a body issue challenge, and I show you one of my photos, yes, you look at me and be like, yeah, but you look so skinny. But as a skinny person, quote
Still,
unquote, there's still issues that I struggle with that I had to overcome. It's not because skinny doesn't mean perfect. And
yes.
that's a misconception that we are told. You know, we see out there that, oh, you have to be skinny, you have to be this particular size to have a perfect body and to be happy with it. Like, no, we all have our own challenges and struggles. And so the work that I do, and of course, pulling that confidence piece from Carnival into that is definitely a plus.
Yes, yes. Well, and body image is a social construct, right? And we all are socialized by these media messages
Yeah.
of what is acceptable and what's not. And so I love that you have that experience and can figure out a way how to invite that into like your day-to-day presence. And Lizzo is someone that so many of us have great respect for how she is showing up in all of her authenticity so powerfully and sharing it with others.
Yeah. And I I mean, I can only imagine how liberating and freeing she feels. And it's also a reminder, you know, you'll see it. Some people like you and some people don't. But the most important thing is, are you happy being yourself? If you're happy being yourself, then that one person in that room that's like, that person doesn't matter because you're happy being yourself. I'm gonna keep saying this. We only have one life. How are you showing up in this life that you have for yourself? That's important.
Absolutely. Well, and I sense that even in your hesitation to share your story about Carnival, like, right, there's a little bit of hesitancy. And I'm wondering, are there any other situations that you walk into with trepidation every time?
I mean, I don't think so. I've really gone to that space where I'm comfortable being myself. You know, I'm happy being myself. I don't feel the need like I have to like be someone that I'm not. I think over the last couple of years and the struggles that I've had on my own, both, you know, especially personally, mentally, that I've had, and realizing how important it is to protect my space and to be happy and to not worried so much about what everyone else is doing and not being worried about the progress and comparing myself to anyone else, and being really intentional and focused on my own journey. That's really allowed me to be grounded in who I am, and knowing that whatever goals I set for myself should be my own. It should not be in comparison to anyone else. How I want to show up is just about me and how I want to express myself, and what impact and influence do I want to have with those that I'm coming in contact with, and how do I want to help, you know, other women and women of color feel the same the same level of self-worth and self-confidence. And so I try as much as I can to stay in the space of self and just be reminded as to who I want to be and how I want to show up. So yeah, I'm trying not to allow the world to control the perception of who I am.
Yes. Well, and so how you refuse to allow the world to do that, to shift the narrative for you, and that you're controlling the narrative. What's something about yourself that you actually refuse to hide?
Oh, wow. I have to think about this one for a moment. Something that I refuse to hide. I think something that I've come to terms with in refusing to hide is being vulnerable. So I'm very, very much so a logical person. Like, problem, Solution. I don't dwell in the emotions. And that is something that I learned the hard way in what it means to be emotional when making decisions and knowing that it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to not have everything figured and not to always apply that logical side of me. And so I am vulnerable by even like usually like sharing my own personal stories is not something that I was ever comfortable in doing. My own struggles wasn't something that I was comfortable in doing with total strangers. Like you had to like really know me. I really had to like have you in a protective space and it's like one person, but that's something that I've learned that I'm okay with sharing that. I'm okay with being vulnerable. I'm okay with sharing the not so good parts and sharing it in a room that with people that I don't know and they don't know me and we get to learn about each other. So I've come a long way in that journey.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate how your self-awareness of the fact that you are logical actually connects to your styling. Like, and you talked about you like to use colors to balance out maybe your personality a little bit. And I think that that's an important thing to know is that you can paint the full picture through what you wear that complements and augments your personality and persona.
Absolutely. I say I'm super introverted. I am that person who goes to a networking event and I'm like, okay, I need to pump myself up. I need to, play some music, get ready, know what questions in advance. I'm gonna like my icebreaker questions. And so what I've learned is that I use, as I said, style is not just an act. Getting dressed is not just an act of getting dressed. It's also a tool. So I've used it as a tool to really help me get into conversations that I may be feeling uncomfortable with or may not, unsure as to how to start a conversation. And so walking into a room wearing a bright color, wearing colors when everyone else is wearing black, trust me, someone is going to say, I love that red, or I love how you color block that. And, it then becomes a conversation starter for me. So yeah, I've definitely been, learned how to like express that part of my personality that's not a natural part of who I am.
Yeah. So when you're walking into those rooms and standing out in a crowd, what is your superpower?
Ah, walking in. So it's interesting that I say I'm an introvert, but whenever I walk into a room and someone goes, "Oh, I love your nails." Like I'm wearing pink nails at the moment. It's like, "Oh, I love that color in you." I get this air of, "Oh, let's talk. Yeah, how are you?" And we get into that, banter and get to know each other. And so I say like my superpower, like walking into that room, is one, knowing that I belong in that room. And two, knowing that I don't have to connect with everyone in the room. I think that's something that the misconception that we have, especially when we networking, is like we have to connect with everyone. I always say make your hot five list, like 5 people you want to connect with. You connect with those 5 persons, and you're like Zen. I've done my job, but that's like part of my superpower, just walking in that room and owning the space that I'm in, not shrinking when someone gives me a compliment or someone says hi, but really opening up and in engaging in conversation and making them feel welcome and comfortable, just getting to know each other.
Well, let me reframe that question. In the proverbial room, what is your superpower?
Oh, my superpower, I would say, it's style. That's that's it. It's style. It's style, what I wear and how I show up in those rooms. Yeah.
Well, as you're showing up in those rooms and you think about the world that we're navigating, what are some stories that need to be told? Or at least one story that needs to be told?
Oh, one story that needs to be told, I think, from a Black woman's perspective, is who we are as individuals is not limited to the one story we've been told about us as a collective.
Mm.
And yeah, it's important that you get to know someone as an individual and not based on the narrative and stories that you've been told.
Yes. Well, it has been a pleasure getting to know you as an amazing individual, the journey that you've been on, the work that you're doing, the impact that you're having through that work. I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I invite you to let our listeners know about any special projects you're working on or where they can find you.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I really did enjoy this conversation. It always brings me joy being able to have these conversations and talk about how we can shape and change the narrative for Black women in the world. And so thank you very much for having me. Those that, listening to this podcast, I want to connect with me. You can do so from on my website, which is styletaimpact.com. You can also, I hang out on LinkedIn. That is my favorite platform of choice. You can find me there as Solita C Roberts, or you can find me on Instagram. I'm there as well at Style to Impact. That's my handle on Instagram. A couple of things that, I'm always working on. How can I really help Black and brown women represent more of who they are in the clothes that they wear? And I know a lot of them, coming out of the pandemic, coming out of different changes that they may have gone throughout the couple of years, is that they're trying to really tap into more of who they are and really being able to show up more authentically. And, some of the ways that I do that is to help them to redefine what their personal style is, redefine what's in their wardrobe, and really get it to a place that reflects more of who they are and having those things in their closet. So, under my service catalog, there is the wardrobe reset. That's something that if you're in that space where like, I need to reclaim my wardrobe, I need to have more of who I am being represented in my wardrobe, then definitely that's a service for you. But if you're on that path where like, Solita, I've never, ever thought about investing in my style, I really need to represent more of who I am, then a style starter package is definitely something that would be more suitable for you. But I'm looking forward to hearing from anyone, even if they have questions like, how do I even get started with my personal style? Then definitely, get on those social media handles that I just shared with you. That's on LinkedIn, Solita C Roberts, or on Instagram, Style to Impact.
Well, and if you want someone who's going to help you frame how you want others to treat you, and if you want to make sure as soon as you walk in the room, you garner everyone's respect, you want to check out her website, go to Style to Impact. You've completely reframed how I think about personal stylists. You've distinguished yourself from someone who's going to go your personal shopper or who's going to get clothes for you, and the clothes that they can put on the mannequin they're going to put on you, to you want to work with someone like Solita, who is helping you dress in alignment with who you are and how you want to show up authentically. And there's nuance there, but I think it's an important nuance. And so Solita, thank you for the work that you're doing. I wish you well in your endeavors. I'm going to mention you when anybody is talking about needing someone to help them with their fashion sense, because I just think that your perspective and intentionality behind your brand is a really important one, particularly with women and women of color. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for joining me on Unlocking the Club.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, that's it for another episode of Unlocking the Club. And again, I am just mesmerized by the conversation that we just had with Solita C Roberts and the concept of how do you want to show up and how can you use your wardrobe to impact how others see you in a way that's not just about fashion, but it's about authenticity, where it is in alignment with your brand, with your objectives, with your goals and your North Star. I am going to walk into my closet tomorrow and have a different perspective on what I'm going to put on in that morning as I get ready to get on Zoom or before I have another meeting. And I hope you all will as well. And consider taking that moment to look in the mirror and pause and have a little bit of self-awareness about what is important to you. How do you want to show up in your interactions? Pause and reflect and incorporate that into what you put on your body, the beautiful bodies that we all have in different sizes, shapes, and colors. This was Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. If you enjoyed this conversation, please head on over to the Codebreakers Lounge on Facebook, where we'll continue the conversation. We'll talk about fashion sense. We'll talk about what it does require for us to show up powerfully with whatever we're putting on our bodies. And if you enjoy this conversation, we hope we'll see you over there. And we hope that you'll tune in for our next episode. Until then, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.